Welcome to the Business for Makers podcast, brought to you by George Supply Company. Each episode, we explore topics you need to know to grow your maker hobby into a maker business and brand. I'm Scott Shermans. This week, we talk to Katie of Carpenter Katie Co. about editing your assortment to improve efficiency of production. Today, we're talking to Katie of Carpenter Katie Co. on Instagram, as well as carpenterkatieco.com, a gorgeous website on the Shopify platform, and host of her Makers Making Money podcast. What I love about Katie is she speaks from the heart and talks about her wins and her losses as an entrepreneur. And while I have many years of business experience, Katie is deep in the weeds of a woodworking business, much more so than I am. So I wanted to have her on to share some of that experience, and especially a topic she recently did on her podcast about editing her assortment. Welcome to the Business for Makers podcast, Katie.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So you recently did an episode on simplifying your Etsy shop. You discussed how in the early days of your Etsy store, you had a wide variety of home decor items. And as time passed, your wall pocket product became a bestseller. So you made some hard decisions. Can you walk us through some of those hard decisions?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. So when I started my Etsy shop, I was just kind of like, I started it on a whim and I was like, let me just throw everything out there, just come up with a bunch of ideas and see what sticks. I didn't really even have an intention of, I guess, kind of finding a specialty at that time. But I'd looked at a lot of Etsy shops and doing some of my research before I started mine. And I always wondered, why do people like just have just one or two products in their shop and just maybe have like a bunch of variations of those products? I never really understood it. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to have more of an assortment, like a broader range and kind of just be maybe like, not really having a specialty other than wood home decor. So that's what I did when I started my shop. But I learned really quickly like what products were picking up, and then the other ones, it's just like some of the products I never even sold a single one of them. So it just became obvious like I need to delete these because it just doesn't. I didn't love the photos that I had, and it was just like I just felt like it wasn't representative of what I was trying to build. So yeah, so I guess that's what I did. I just started broad, and then eventually the front runners just let themselves be known, and then I started to just focus more on those and coming up with different variations of those products.
So, for instance, the wall pocket, now you had just one size, right? But that was a bestseller. So you decided to pivot a little bit there.
Yeah, so I started off with just like one size of wall pocket, which, this was just an idea I found like on a blog or something like that. I didn't really invent it myself. But I made it for myself and I was like, oh, let me see if other people would want to buy it. So that was kind of the inspiration behind the original idea of starting the Etsy shop. And yeah, so I just started off, I had one size and then people started asking me, oh, do you make them bigger? So then I just, I would do it for them. And then eventually I just added a bigger listing. So those two became kind of like my top two products. And then recently, probably within the last like 6 months, I added like a skinny version, which I sell together with the eucalyptus. So it's kind of like a package deal. And that's now has become my number one selling product because I think
Really?
people just love that it's just they get everything in one shot. They don't have to buy the pocket, then go buy something else to put inside of it.
People, they like the idea of it being on the wall, but they might not even know where to get eucalyptus or the glass vase. Like
Right, yeah.
you just go to Michael's or Joann Fabric or whatever, but that's a mystery to some people, I
Yeah,
guess.
not everyone has access to that. And I actually get the eucalyptus. It's grown in the US in California, which is pretty crazy. It's like a small family farm and they grow the eucalyptus and then they preserve it themselves. So it'll last like forever basically if you take care of it.
I I assumed it was plastic. I didn't even realize it was real.
Yeah, no, it's
Okay.
real. And I mean, I just thought like, oh, I just figured it was like only grown in Australia. I had no idea that we grew eucalyptus here in the US. But yeah. So the stuff I get is really good quality.
And so then you decided to change your finishes also, right? A little bit?
Yeah, so yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I was always doing the staining and I have I think 10 different colors, which in retrospect that's kind of a lot of options and it makes my life a little bit more difficult, but it is what it is and I don't really want to go change that or go back now, but then I added the option to kind of like do like a dip paint on the pocket, which that one also that was like a suggestion by a customer. They asked if I could do it. Actually, it was like a customer's husband had the idea, oh, could you put a little paint on the bottom of it? And I was like, you know what, that's a good idea and I'm going to add it to my shop.
It looks cool.
So yeah, it
So
does.
so you took these bestsellers and you're trying to maximize the business you get off of that. And then you had this other pile of stuff. And so you made some hard decisions. I know you edited some things out. So there was some, if I remember from the podcast, there were some criteria you had for picking the items that you just weren't going to, whether you didn't sell any, or there's also some other criteria, right?
Yes, that's true. Yeah, it once I got busier doing other stuff or like once I was getting started getting more regular orders and like the work became a little bit more demanding, then I realized some of the stuff just it's not efficient to produce in the manner that I'm doing it just on my own and doing everything myself. So that was definitely a big thing. Some stuff like it, there was just way too much work involved in it, and it was just like not worth the money that I was making. I wasn't really like being
Hmm.
fairly compensated for my time, I felt like. So that was definitely one criteria. I don't remember if there were other things that I talked about on the podcast, but
I think
I would say that's the biggest one.
you said some things were fragile and hard to ship.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I had a few things that I really liked them, but yeah, it was like I had a few instances of things arriving broken, and it was just like I tried to kind of change the construction and figure out a better way, but it was just what it was just like very difficult to ship it.
Right. So you eliminated things that didn't sell and just made your life more difficult needlessly, and just
Yeah.
said, okay, well, somebody else can sell those things, and I'm going to double and triple down on these key items. And that's worked out
Yeah,
work
it's
for
worked
you?
out very well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still have, I probably have, I don't even know how many listings I have, maybe like 15 to 20 different products in total. So there's still some things that like they don't really sell that often, but I like them and I keep them there. And sometimes when I do get those orders, I'm like, oh, now I have to go make this because it's kind of like you have to totally shift up your whole
Yeah.
process.
So your shop
So
is kind of constructed for wall pockets on wall pockets on wall pockets.
yes.
The
And
process is
I
set in.
Exactly. And I have like a very part-time employee who helps me with some of the assembly work. So I cut a bunch of stuff and then he comes and picks it up and then every week he delivers me like a new batch of assembled wall pockets. So it's just
Oh,
easier to kind of just keep the scope pretty narrow so that I can like take advantage of the help. If I have too much stuff, then it becomes too complicated, I feel.
okay.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. So he has the opportunity to master his little portion
yeah.
without having to master 17 different things, and then he's the master of none. Interesting.
Right. Yeah. And he doesn't have a wood shop, so he's just kind of like I have to make it easy for him to do with a very limited,
Just
glue, nails kind of
okay.
thing.
So he's like watching a football game and doing your construction at the same time.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Something like that.
Perfect. And then I think you also mentioned that you were, and maybe you've talked about it just a few minutes ago, staying true to your style as a creator.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so,
Yeah, I think that's been a little bit of like a I definitely there's you get there's so much like outside influence and you feel like you have to you see other people doing things really well and you kind of feel like, "Oh, like well, I should do that too." Like it's working out for them, but
yeah.
I don't know, I think that's difficult and I feel like when I just decided to kind of stay true to like this is my style, this is something I would want in my home and like it came very naturally to me and I didn't feel like I was like trying to push myself to create something that just wasn't coming naturally
Hmm.
to me. So, I think, and it's like people are buying it. So it's like obviously other people like my style too or whatever I
Right.
create. So let me just stick with what's working. And yeah, I think that's important, especially when you're just kind of creating things. It's hard to copy other people, which I definitely tried to do that. Like, don't get me wrong, but
Well,
um,
it's
Yeah.
the allure of having a YouTube video and you look at it and go, I can do that. I'll just
Yep.
add that to my right. And then all of a sudden you have scraps all over the place and you did it, right? But you know, it doesn't it might not fit your style. You could it's interesting too, like you were mentioning, even when I follow people in the woodworking community, so many of them have a style. Like clearly this is what they do. End of discussion, right? I love to look at. I don't know if you know JML Woodcraft, but he does a lot of feathered woods and things like that, and feathered walnut. And his stuff is awesome, but you would never see him make a end grain cutting board. Like he just wouldn't do it,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah.
And these boards are $200, $300. So
That's
it's
awesome.
interesting, and it's when I think of him, I know exactly what I'm going to see on the next
Mm,
Instagram post. So it's
I like
interesting.
that. Yeah, I feel like I'm a very simple person. I like very simple stuff. So the things that
Okay.
I create, like it definitely falls in line with that.
Um, I was just looking at your post today. You have a new toy, drum sander.
Oh yes, I recently I made the investment. I'd been thinking about it for a while because I was just trying to figure out what are some things that I could do aside from like hiring more people because my shop is in my house and I tried to have people working in my home and I just didn't love it. Um, but I was just trying to figure out what can I do to like make this process a little bit more efficient and like make life a little bit easier for myself because otherwise I feel like I'm gonna get burned out and I don't want to stop doing this. I want to keep doing it. So I'm trying to figure out like just mechanically what kind of machine can I maybe buy that will save me at least just like a little bit of time. And
Uh
I
huh.
I landed on the drum sander and I'd been thinking about it for a while. It was a big purchase and I have very limited space, so I don't like to buy a bunch of tools and stuff, but it's amazing. I've been using it for a few weeks now and it's awesome. I love it so much. Definitely worth it.
It has a dust collection on it attached to it,
Yeah, I have
so
dust
that's
collection,
probably
so it'll
yeah.
it'll attach to
So
that.
it's
Yep.
saving you a bunch of trouble. Okay, big
It
mess and
is.
everything
Yeah.
and time. That's
It is.
cool.
Yeah, just it can't do every all of the sanding obviously. There's still a lot of sanding required, but it definitely saves. I've been trying to like figure out how much time I'm saving. I haven't really like landed on a solid number, but it definitely saves time for sure.
That's awesome. So, did you just thinking about you looked at the investment, you looked at maybe the amount of time you might save, you looked at your orders and saw, okay, I'm probably going to need this thing for an extended period of time while I'm paying it off. So you did some of that math because
Yeah.
probably a huge investment for you.
Yeah, it's
And
a
yeah,
big investment. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I don't spend a lot of money on tools, so
yeah,
it's just putting some of the profit back into the business,
yeah,
but yeah, I just looked at it like, how much time is it going to save me? Even if it saves me a couple hours a week, like that's going to pay
yeah,
off in a few months. So,
right.
yeah.
Um, and I was going to mention, and also, oh well, and then a big advantage is also again that you have a streamlined assortment, so you're going to get a lot of use out of it. That because you're doing a lot of pieces of the same thing. And then I thought about that a few minutes ago. That definitely would it. I could see that also being the downside of making the same thing over and over and over.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, oh, well, this is my life now, I guess. It's like it's a blessing, but it's also kind of like, yeah, you gotta I don't know. You got to kind of like see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like
Yeah.
I feel like that's the tough place where I am now is like, I want to continue to grow the business, but it's like, it's not, I'm doing well. Sales are good, everything. Sales are actually a little bit slower like the last month and this month, which I'm actually kind of thankful for. Because this year it's just like I've done better than I've ever done. And I really didn't think that I would get to this place. So I'm very grateful for that. But also it's like, it's it's not really in a place where I can like hire a woodworker or somebody that's like really skilled to do this kind of work, which is what it takes, and still like make it make sense financially. So it's kind of
Right.
like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
stuck in that difficult spot.
Uh huh. Uh huh. Yeah, it's a hard place for everybody to be when you realize here I am. I made it. Be careful what you ask for, because now I have to do all the work.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's like, yep, it's manual labor, so welcome.
I'm Scott Shrivitz, and thank you for listening to the Business for Makers podcast, brought to you by George Supply Company. Subscribe to our podcast to get regular insights and tips for building your maker business. And you can get more information about building your brand, selling merch, and maintaining your business operations, all at georgesupplyco.com. And a special thanks to Katie of Carpenter Katie Co.